Bigg City Puffa. Written and told by Kiefer Adams. Percy brought his stone trucks to the harbour near Tidmouth and was surprised to find Thomas sitting on his own and feeling rather sorry for himself. "Hello, Thomas," Percy greeted. "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing," replied Thomas. "I was just thinking about Marklin." "Why?" "He had a good send-off, you know." "I know, but I wish the other engines, including me, had treated him better. He worked so hard on the railway before I'd even arrived. He didn't deserve what he had been given. Not even that accident." "It's all right," said Percy. "He'll feel better now that he's gone home. Wherever that is." "Do you think he'll be all right?" said Thomas. "I hope so," replied Percy. "Hopefully we'll get to see him again. You never know." Percy puffed away with his trucks, leaving Thomas alone with his thoughts. Marklin, the international tank engine, was now back on his old railway. It was none other than the Bigg City Port, home of Captain Star and Captain Zero's tugs. In the early days of the harbour, Marklin had done all the work on his own, but upon his return he discovered that things had changed since he had been away. As he was being offloaded by his ship, he noticed a little tank engine in the corner of the yard. She was busy shunting some wagons. The engine had long sloping tanks on both sides of her boiler, and her whistle was much like his own, but a little deeper. "Oh, hiya, pet," she called as she noticed Marklin. "It's about time you turned up. I've been working my buffers off." "Who are you?" Marklin said plainly. "Oh, sorry, where are my manners? Little owl love," she called. "You're going to be working with me." "I think you'll find I won't," said Marklin. "I was working here long before you showed up. Besides, I'm ready to start work." "Oh, I don't think so, Chuck," said Little Owl. "You're to report to Mr. Dale. He wants you to be overhauled." "Mr. Dale?" spluttered Marklin. "Why? Don't even argue," Little Owl protested. "Let's just say he's expecting you." "Fine," Marklin harumphed, and he bustled away. Mr. Dale was in charge of the Dockyard Railroad besides the Bigg City Port. Little Owl was right. He had big plans for the international tank engine. "It's good to see you again, Marklin," Mr. Dale said as he entered the workshops. "Don't you worry about a thing. We'll get everything sorted and you'll be back on the rails very soon." "I'd rather start now if that's all right," said Marklin. "I'm afraid that's out of the question, Marklin," said Mr. Dale from his office window. "We've got to overhaul you because things have changed since you've been away. We have to add some minor modifications, so to speak." Before Marklin could even protest, he found himself being overhauled right then and there. Over the next few weeks, Marklin found himself painted in a wartime grey. His funnel was removed, his buffers were taken off, and quite frankly, he looked rather ridiculous. 3 months later, Marklin was still having his overhaul. "Not long now," Mr. Dale would call from the office window. "Just a few more minor modifications and you'll be all good in no time." "Can't I just go back to work as I am?" Marklin would protest. But it was always the same argument. Mr. Dale would always tell Marklin that his modifications were important to the railroad. Marklin would always admit defeat every time. Time seemed to drag on, and Marklin soon found himself in an official coat of dark grey. There was no trace of his old self now. A brand new stovepipe chimney had been fitted on top of his boiler. Admittingly, Marklin felt rather silly. There were plans for his front headlamps to be removed, with a large lamp being placed on top of his smoke box. Marklin's overhaul was also slowly coming to an end, And when there wasn't a time that Mr. Dale was shouting at him to say all was nearly done, Marklin reflected on the early days of Sodor. He had recently begun to recall his first encounter with Thomas. Thomas had been nervous about the engine at first, as Marklin wanted to show him what needed to be done. But of course, as most new engines were, Thomas believed he could do everything, and Marklin made sure that he was put in his place. It wasn't just Thomas's early days Marklin recalled. He remembered the time when he and Edward pulled a train up Gordon's Hill, how he had been cheeky to Gordon, and of course his accident with the trucks. Marklin sighed to himself. He wished now he had been a better engine to the others. Before long, Marklin's overhaul was complete. Winter had since come to the Bigg City Port, and Marklin felt rather uncomfortable as he stood outside the workshops that had been putting him back together into a different engine. He now had a brand new cowcatcher where his buffers had been. The new headlamp and stovepipe chimney, or stack, as Mr. Dale called it, felt very uncomfortable. Soon, Marklin was being put through his paces by Mr. Dale. His puffing was majestic, and the steam he emitted from his new piston boxes was incredible. Soon, there was only one more thing Mr. Dale wanted to see.
"All right, Marklin,"
he shouted from the office window.
"it's time to see what that new stack of yours can do. Line it up when you're ready."
"I'm not going to enjoy this," Marklin groaned. He closed his eyes, braced himself, and the next thing he knew, a great cloud of steam emitted from his stack. Mr. Dale was delighted.
"On that note, we can conclude that your tests are complete,"
he said finally.
"Little Al is waiting for you by the dockyard. Please report to her immediately. She'll show you what needs to be done."
"Yes, sir," said Marklin rather reluctantly. He puffed away, feeling rather nervous. Towing a small truck behind him so that he could carry out his first deliveries, Marklin found Little Al not too far up the line. "Oh, hiya, pet," she greeted. "I tell you what, you look much better." "Well, thank you," said Marklin, blushing a little. He emitted a cloud of steam from his funnel. "I must say, pet," Little Al said, "that new stack looks good on you. Maybe it's time to change your name as well." "But I've always been Marklin," he said. "Maybe you just need a fresh appearance," Little Al suggested. "What about, Puffa?" "Puffa?" Marklin exclaimed. "Yeah, look at your stack. Look how much steam it emits." "Don't tell me that's not a good name." Marklin pondered for a moment. "All right then," he said finally. "Then Puffa it will be." "Splendid, Chuck," Little Al said. "Come on, Puffa, let's show you around." Puffa felt much happier. He did miss Thomas and the other engines on Sodor, but he was glad to be back in familiar surroundings. But there would be a time when Thomas would see him again, and we know what would happen when he did come to the Bigg City Port, don't we?